Hey everybody, this is Russ from Retro Game Core. I just flew in earlier today from our trip to Europe over the past couple weeks. I'll make a whole video about that. I've got like 600 clips of footage that I have to organize and whatnot, but before I start working on that video, as well as a bunch of reviews that I have in mind, I do want to give just a couple updates that have happened over the past couple weeks. And I usually don't make like these kind of news update videos, but a lot has happened, some good and some bad, and so I want to go over three main topics that have happened since I've been gone. To start, I want to talk about my latest video and why it was taken down. Yeah, there's going to be some drama here, unfortunately. And then also I want to talk about the new Retroid Pocket devices that are coming out, because I haven't really been able to talk to you folks about that. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about AYANEO, which is a company that I do a bunch of reviews for, and how that's going to look going forward. And so yeah, we're going to pack all that into this video here today, and I'll make it as short as possible, but to be honest, I haven't heard from you in a couple weeks, and I'm excited to see you. And so let's just go ahead and get started. Okay, let's start with my latest video and why it was taken down. So it was all about this thing, which is called the MIG Flash now. It used to be called MIG Switch, and this is the cartridge dumper, and there's also a reader or cartridge that you can put in your Nintendo Switch. So the idea here is that essentially you can take a Nintendo Switch cartridge, put it in here, and then extract that file via USB onto your computer. And personally, I think it's a wonderful way of being able to back up your own games so that you can use them either on your own Nintendo Switch using that little cartridge thing, or just via emulation on your computer as well. Now, in the United States, there are consumer protections out there that say that you can back up your own media, like for example, taking a CD and burning it to MP3, things like that. However, as I've mentioned on this channel before, actually backing up your own video game files is something that has not been contested in court, and so it is a bit of a gray area. Either way, in that video, I showed off how I took my own Nintendo Switch cartridges and then I backed them up and then played them both on a computer as well as on my own Nintendo Switch. And to be honest, this was the second video that I made about this topic, and so I wasn't expecting to get like any sort of Nintendo attention, but unfortunately that is what happened. Now, as far as I know, Nintendo cannot just take down my video because I'm showing off this cartridge reader. They really should be coming after the cartridge reader people themselves. So what happened in taking my video down is that when I was cycling through all the various games that I had backed up, one of the games that I showed off was a Nintendo game. It was Super Mario 3D World. Now, in my own infinite wisdom, I decided not to show any gameplay, and so instead I just booted up the game and then showed the title screen. So it just said, hey, Super Mario 3D World, and then I cut the footage right there. But unfortunately, that title screen was enough for Nintendo to say that, hey, that's my intellectual property. You're showing off my Mario game in your video, and so I want you to take that down. And unfortunately, they used the most drastic measure they could, which means that they did a full copyright claim as well as a copyright strike on my channel. And as a result, when I woke up yesterday morning, my video was gone. I had a copyright strike on my channel and then an email from YouTube saying, don't ever do that again. Now, the thing is, Nintendo is fully within their rights to be able to say that, hey, we created Super Mario 3D World and we don't want you to show it in a video. And you could argue that it's very unfair of them to say that in this video in particular, we don't want you to show it because there are millions of people showing off Nintendo games on their videos. And it's also very apparent they just wanted the video taken down. And so what they did then is they just took and struck that one part, and then that took that entire video down as a result. Now, as a creator, I have a couple other rights. For example, I could do a counterclaim, but that counterclaim would have to say that I didn't actually show Super Mario 3D World, which I obviously did. I could also just remove that snippet or blur out Super Mario 3D World and then try to re-upload it and see if it gets past it. But the thing is that if I get 3 strikes, my channel goes away. And I don't know about you, but I don't really have the means to fight against a multi-billion-dollar corporation that is known for having lawyers that are very litigious. And so as it stands, I'm not really going to fight this at all. I'm not going to try to re-upload or circumvent Nintendo just because I feel like I'm on their radar. And I've already gone through and done all the things that YouTube required me to do. They made me take a copyright class. Like I had to show that I knew what copyright meant, which was a little bit insulting, but I got through it and everything's okay. So long story short, about 40,000 people were able to watch my video, and I do think that the MIG Switch dumper really does have some value, especially if you have a large cartridge library and you want to back it up for later. I think this is actually well worth your time. And if you want to learn more about it, I'm going to point you to Bob Wolf's video about the exact same cartridge dumper, which I think is a pretty awesome tool. So at the end of the day, when it comes to this whole Nintendo thing, yeah, my video was taken down, and yes, they were well within their rights to say that, hey, you shouldn't show my game in your video. It's kind of shady the way they went about it in order to take down that MIG Flash thing, but I totally get it. This is a console that is currently on the market, and they see this as a threat to their bottom line. Personally, I don't see the dumper that way. I've already bought like over 100 cartridges from Nintendo. They've gotten my money. At this point, I just want to preserve my games and then also play them on other platforms. Anyway, that's the first news point that I wanted to bring up. The second one is going to be talking about the Retroid Pocket 5 and Retroid Pocket Mini. Now, before I left on my trip, I had seen a little bit of grumblings about it, a couple teaser images, things like that, but I didn't have the whole story, but now we do. And every time that Retroid releases a new device, I usually like to do one of these like some thoughts on the Retroid Pocket 4 kind of video. And so this is kind of a condensed version of that. So when it comes down to it, Retroid has already released pre-order pages for both the Retroid Pocket 5 and Retroid Pocket Mini. And these are essentially replacements for the other two main devices they have in their catalog, the Retroid Pocket 4 and 4 Pro, as well as the Retroid Pocket 2S. Now there are some interesting differences between these and their other releases, and even between each other. To start, let's talk about what they have in common. The first is that they both have an AMOLED display, which I think is going to be great, especially if you want to have really rich and vibrant colors. In addition, they're both running the same chipset, which is the Snapdragon 865. Now, this is a chipset that I've tested previously in other devices like the Pimax Portal, and so I already know that this is going to perform up to GameCube and PS2 really well. Also bear in mind, because we're using a Qualcomm Snapdragon chip, that opens up the world of possibilities for a lot of other things, including the ability to load third-party GPU drivers. These are commonly known as turn-up drivers, and a lot of emulators already accommodate them, including Dolphin for GameCube and Wii, as well as PS Vita, and then also you can use it for 3DS and even, yes, Nintendo Switch. And so even though this chipset is not a huge bump in performance from the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, I think that the actual performance when you're playing a lot of these emulated systems is going to be a lot more compatible and accurate. In addition, the Snapdragon 865 chipset does have Linux drivers available, which means that certain Linux distributions might be able to be loaded from a microSD card onto this device. The Retroid team has already been working on a port of Batocero, which means that you can just load that from your card, which should be a pretty nice and seamless experience. And there are other Linux-based distributions which are interested in getting involved as well. Now, one thing worth noting is that we're talking about ARM-based Linux and not x86-based Linux. That means they're completely different architectures. And I think that when people hear that, oh yeah, you can run Linux on a Retroid Pocket device, they think that, oh, I can run like SteamOS or I can maybe play some PC games. It's not that simple because, again, it's ARM-based Linux. What this really means is that we do have some options to be able to play some PC games or other apps via Linux, but it is going to have to run through a translation layer. So it's not going to be a seamless experience, and it will take a lot of development work. And I get it, a lot of people don't like using Android-based devices, and so they like the idea of being able to use Linux instead, and this seems like the perfect fit. But I would say just to temper your expectations, and that I don't think that on day one you're going to be able to run Linux-based distributions with no issues and be able to play all your PC games or anything close to that. But I do have some hope that we might see some other emulators actually working on this device besides the ones that you can find on Android. So maybe a little bit better PS2 emulation or even Wii U would be super awesome. But the way I'm looking at it is that I'm expecting this to be an Android-based device and that it might be really cool to see what we can do on Linux, but I wouldn't buy it specifically for the Linux capability, at least right now. So the way I like to describe it is that, hey, this might be very cool to play around with, but I don't think it's going to immediately overcome all of the shortcomings that you get from playing with an Android-based device. Regardless, I'm super excited about this chipset because I think it's going to help with compatibility on the Android side, and I always love the idea of being able to tinker with a different operating system as well, and I think we're going to find that here. Now, the main difference between the two is that one is obviously the Retroid Pocket 5 and the other is the Mini. As you can imagine, the Mini one is going to be smaller. The Mini has a 3.7-inch display with a 4:3 aspect ratio and a 720p resolution, which I think is actually some really great specs, especially for an AMOLED display. Like with the Retroid Pocket 5, this device does seem to be a little bit larger than the previous model, but I'm hoping that it won't be too big. Now, personally, I've been waiting forever at this point for a 4:3 based device that can run up to PS2 and GameCube reasonably well, and I think that this one is probably the closest that we've ever come to that. So personally, I am very excited about this one. In fact, I bought my own Retroid Pocket Mini just because I wanted to get a specific color, even though I know full well that I'm probably going to be getting a review unit at some point as well. Now, the Retroid Pocket 5 is also pretty exciting. This one is going to have a 16:9 aspect ratio display that's going to be 5.5 inches and 1080p in resolution. Those are all really great specs. But I think that in terms of performance, we're not going to see a huge jump from the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro to the Retroid Pocket 5. So I think this is really going to be more of a quality of life improvement improvement in terms of just having a bigger and better display. And so personally, I am a little bit less excited about the Retroid Pocket 5 just because I love my Retroid Pocket 4 Pro so much. There are some things about the Retroid Pocket 5 that are also really interesting, like the fact that it has ergonomic grips, so it might be a little bit more comfortable to hold. But also bear in mind, like with the Retroid Pocket Mini, this one's a little bit bigger than the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro and quite a bit thicker. Either way, both of these devices are now up for pre-order, but as always with any pre-order, especially something that's sight unseen, I would maybe wait for some reviews if you are hesitant about these devices. And I expect to get my Retroid Pocket Mini review unit in the next couple of weeks, so it should be pretty soon that you'll see a review from me. Now, the Retroid Pocket 5 is going to be coming out a month after that, so it's going to be quite a bit of time before I get my hands on that one, but of course I'll make a video about that as well. Either way, that's just a quick snapshot of these two devices. I'll have links down below if you want to check them out, but again, I would exercise some caution just buying it sight unseen. Retroid in particular has had a little bit of hiccups when it comes to the very early releases of their devices. For example, with the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, they had issues with their trigger buttons as well as some colorization issues. They fixed all that stuff, and so if you buy them now, they're completely fine. But at the same time, they've had this history of having just a little bit of a speed bump with those very early releases. Either way, I am excited about these Retroid devices, and I'm probably more excited about the Retroid Pocket Mini just because I want something that's small and compact and powerful, and this one seems to be very much so that case. Okay, so our last topic is going to be about AYANEO. This is a company that makes handheld PCs and also some Android-based devices, and I've been covering them for almost 3 years at this point. As soon as they got a new CEO and they reached out to me back in like January of 2022, I've been making videos about every single release they've ever made. I think at this point it's been about 20 videos that I've made, and some of these are the most challenging videos I've ever done because these are very high ticket price items, and then also it just takes a long time to test everything with a handheld PC. You've got to test, the Windows side, see if it'll boot into Linux. You got to test out the PC gaming performance. You got to test out battery life and also emulation and all that kind of stuff. So it usually will take me at least a solid week of work, somewhere between 40 and 60 hours per device. Now, personally, I like making reviews about AYANEO devices because they always seem to do something that's very interesting with each of them. Either it's going to be something like a really small form factor or a really cool display, or maybe they're just trying something new, like a 2-screen handheld, which they did previously as well. But the thing with making a review about an AYANEO device in general is that it is pretty complicated. The first thing is that in addition to all the things I have to test, you have to bear in mind that these also carry a very high sticker price compared to the competition. Because this is a smaller company, they don't have the economies of scale to be able to produce something like the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally in greater numbers and be able to reduce those costs. And so in general, AYANEO devices tend to be on the more expensive side and a little bit more boutique in that they're trying to fill a specific niche. The other thing to bear in mind is that because of that high price point, I have somewhat high expectations. If I'm going to be spending over $1,000 on a handheld, then I'm going to have expectations that I'm going to get my money's worth out of it as well. And so generally when I do review an AYANEO device, I take those things into consideration. And so something like a bad D-pad seems a lot worse on a $1,000 handheld compared to something that only costs like 30 or 40. And so like with all my videos, I try to balance the good and the bad, but I do give a little bit of scrutiny to something that has a higher price point, like I do with anything that costs a lot of money, like the MSI Claw. I wasn't very kind to that device either. And so while I do think that there are quite a few AYANEO devices that are well worth their price point, including the AYANEO Air 1S, I think that's probably one of the best fits I've ever found for one of their devices, I still tend to be, on the overall grand scheme of things, a little bit harsh or negative, just because I have to point out all the bad that comes with the good as well. Now, another one of my favorite things about reviewing an AYANEO handheld is that they send me an early review prototype. And so what I'm able to do in those videos is give feedback to the company and say, hey, maybe these buttons could be adjusted in this way, or maybe the D-pad could be fixed as well. And often they actually will implement that feedback for the retail releases. And those are some of my proudest moments when it comes to being a reviewer, when I can actually make the device better for everybody else. And so I've really taken a lot of pride in those moments. So you're probably wondering why I'm even talking about AYANEO and like all of my review process when it comes to these handhelds. And a lot of it comes down to the fact that I don't think I'm going to be getting review units from AYANEO in the future. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any confirmation of this. They've been ignoring me on Discord as well as not replying to my emails, so I'm not really sure. But I just know for a fact that they emailed me a couple months ago and asked if I wanted a review unit of the AYANEO Pocket Micro. And this is a smaller handheld, it's Android based, that I actually was pretty excited to review because I think that, again, it might be one of those small handhelds like the Retroid Pocket Mini that might be powerful enough to be able to play through PS2 and GameCube games, which is exactly what I'm looking for. So anyway, when they emailed me and asked me if I wanted a review unit, I said absolutely. Now, I waited about a month and I didn't get any device at all, and I saw that other people were getting the review units and making videos about it. So I emailed them and asked them, hey, could I get a tracking number? Like, what's going on with that review unit that we had talked about last month? And unfortunately, at that point, just all communication stopped. So I even tried emailing their CEO, got no response or whatever. And so I just think at this point that they've decided to not send me review units, and rather than confirm that, they would rather just not address it. Now, just so that we're clear, I bear no ill will to AYANEO. They're welcome to market their devices however they see fit. So if they don't want to send one to me, no problem. I totally understand that, especially because I get into the weeds with my reviews, and some of the things that I find I don't necessarily like, and I do tend to tell my audience those things. And also bear in mind that I am very averse to any sort of things related to drama, like watching like YouTube drama videos and stuff like that. I really don't enjoy doing that stuff, and I honestly just don't enjoy talking about this stuff right now either. But I do think it's important for two reasons. The first is that they use Indiegogo as their platform for all their pre-order campaigns. And so what happens is they open it up for like a month or two, and during that period is when all the reviews come out, and then people make their judgment and decide whether or not to back that device. And unfortunately, if I'm not going to be getting an early review unit, I won't be able to make that review video to be able to tell you whether or not I think that you should back that campaign or not. And the second part is that if I'm not getting any of these early review units, I can't give any feedback to the company to say, hey, these are some things that you might want to look into for the retail unit. Instead, it's really just going to be whatever comes out at retail. Now, the thing is, I like reviewing AYANEO handhelds. It takes a lot of time, but I think it's time well spent, especially if somebody's going to be spending a lot of money on a handheld. But unfortunately, because of their higher price point, I'm not going to be able to afford to buy each one of their units to make a review. So I'm going to have to be a little bit choosy about which ones I review and which ones I can't. Now, I know a lot of people think that YouTubers are like, swimming in the money and all that, and I wish that was the case, but unfortunately, I do have to balance what I'm buying when it comes to making my reviews. So in putting this all together, what this means is that yes, I'm going to try to buy my AYANEO devices, but I'm going to have to just buy them during the Indiegogo campaign like everybody else, which means that I'll just get them as a retail unit, and it's going to be after that pre-order campaign, and then I'll make a review. It's unfortunately not going to be as helpful for those early backers, but if you're just curious to see how those AYANEO devices work like I am, then you'll be able to watch those reviews. And then of course also bear in mind that I'm not going to be able to review every device like I have previously since 2022. So at this point, the only device of theirs that I've pre-ordered is that AYANEO Micro, because I do want that small handheld device, and I am curious to see how it all plays out. Anyway, that's all I really had to say about AYANEO. This is probably the longest segment of the whole video, but I really wanted to frame exactly what happened and why, and what I'm going to be doing going forward. It is kind of a bummer just because I treat my videos as a service to others, and that if you are a potential buyer, it's going to give you all the information that you need to make a more informed decision. But of course, there are going to be other review videos out there, and hopefully they are going to cover some of those same topics that I usually do as well. Anyway, that's about it for this video. I just wanted to do a quick brain dump of all the stuff that has happened here on this channel over the past couple weeks before the jet lag sets in. And of course, be on the lookout for my European trip video, and then I've got a couple other things in the works as well. So let me know what you think in the comments down below, and as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.